Firstly, I would like to thank EcoFIS. This information about rural energy has always been missing from our tools of information about the whole energy mix. And I see this as a start. And I would ask members of the EU institutions, particularly the Commission, to consider including statistics for rural energy as part of the normal statistical data that you would routinely collect. We started Free with the partners because we found that we were talking to policymakers and influencers and their view of rural areas, and I'm being very general now, seemed to be a good place to build wind farms, power stations, and so on, and their consideration of the lifestyle and the energy profile wasn't really strong enough. I was therefore delighted that the two first speakers actually talked a lot about some of the policy areas that I had highlighted as possible solutions and support mechanisms for us to go forward. So I won't repeat that. So firstly, what really did the study tell us? If we look at that, clearly in the different countries there are different pictures, but as a rule, people in rural areas generate more carbon emissions than people in urban areas. To give you an idea, if we take France, someone who lives in a little town in Normandy would produce about 20% more CO2 than if you lived in Paris. Now, some may find that conclusion surprising. I suppose we don't, because the SHV Energy and the partners in Free kind of had a head start because we have always dealt with rural energy. Now, what that does mean is that in terms of policy, these need to be treated a little bit differently occasionally to actually give them a level playing field and support to be part of a new generation of energy. So far, I have to say that not many areas of European policy have taken this initiative and recognised rural areas. And I'm pleased today that Samuel will be presenting a report which is much more focused on the most rural areas, which are beyond the natural gas grid. Because whilst you see pictures of natural gas being used in rural areas, clearly, if it's not available, it's not being used. And then the profile of energy usage in terms of higher carbon and inefficiency is actually even worse. So moving on to the Energy 2050 roadmap. We saw the size of the prize today, 35 million tonnes of CO2 equivalent, and that represents 3,500 towns. Now, if you want to know what a town of 10,000 people looks like, I'm sure Google in your own country. In here, in Belgium, it's the seaside town of Knock. In England, it's the county town of Buckingham. So if you come from Belgium or England, you have a view of that. But they are kind of typical market towns. Saving the emissions of 3,500 is a big prize. The question about the 2050 Climate Action Roadmap, which also includes the 2020 target discussions, also raises the question of, if we accept that 20% of the energy will be renewable, by definition 80% of it will not be. One of the things I think we need to think about a little bit more is, do we care what the rest of that 80% looks like? I suggest that we should do, because there's a huge difference between the lowest polluting conventional fuels and the highest. And I think that that comes out as well later. Next, energy taxation. Now, we understand that there is a logic to introducing a taxation scheme which recognizes carbon dioxide emissions. We understand that. But we believe that just looking at that, without looking at any other social or environmental impact of the fuels, is a bit of a blunt instrument. And we also question whether at this stage such a blunt instrument could do good for people in Finland and people in Greece with the same level of minimum taxation. So the impact of energy, we believe, is not just about CO2 emissions. Black carbon, as recognised by the Parliament only last week, is now a recognised global warmer, and it will be a wasted opportunity if this was to be ignored with its impact on air quality and human health. The study produced by Ecofis also alludes to energy efficiency in rural areas. Well, there's two problems really with that. Firstly, the building stock is generally much older. In France, for instance, half of the rural homes predate 1950. So some of the modern, more fashionable solutions for insulation are simply not possible. So maybe we have to do a little bit more to these houses to bring them up to date, and maybe more money is needed to help with that. The two solutions in the short term, I think, that need to be considered is, firstly, the encouragement of decentralized energy production and consumption. When we talk about rural energy and rural electricity, if you imagine the rural home or business on the end of a cable, which could be over 100 kilometers long, that is just about the most inefficient way of using electricity, however it's generated. To have a decentralized micro power plant, micro CHP, in that location that pushes electricity back a little bit as well, starts to make good sense. There is also the question of supply security. Supply security in Brussels means something very specific and very political. For people in rural areas and the most remote rural areas, supply security means, will my lights go on if I turn on the switch? 2 days ago in Brussels, we found for 8 hours that didn't happen. In this very district, we had a blackout for 8 hours. And the panic on the streets was unbelievable. I live in a rural area in England. It happens about once a month. So supply security is helped in a local level by decentralized power production. And then directing new funds to energy saving projects in rural areas. Smart cities has been up and running, and we think that's a good idea. But please don't exclude rural areas. The prize is big, not only in the case of carbon emissions, the prize is enormous for the individuals who will benefit from cleaner, less labor-intensive and less polluting energy. Finally, I would like to say something about the agriculture. If there was a surprise in this report for us, it was the state of energy in agriculture. The domination of oil and coal was even greater than we had expected. I think that there is an opportunity in the new Common Agriculture Policy, which now has 2 tiers, one of which could be used to support innovation in rural energy, specifically for agriculture. There is a big opportunity to do that, and I think that we will be very wise to look at the opportunities that this presents in more details. So, as you can see, there's a lot to be done, and today you'll hear far more about concrete examples in the next section of the positive solutions, as opposed to some of the problems that maybe I've gone on a bit. And if you want to help us, if you want to follow us in terms of this campaign and keep up to date with the latest issues on rural energy, then please join our free network. Leave your business card or email details behind, and we'll then join you into our new LinkedIn forum, where we can start to have a much more active debate and join this kind of policy up for the future together.